Hi everyone, welcome back. Does anyone else do this? I'm going on holiday, literally, well it's Monday, I'm going on Friday. On Saturday, just gone, I decided, I really need something new. I really need a new dress or something. That would be so nice. So anyway, it seemed like a really good idea at the time, and a bit of humming and ahhing on a pattern, decided to make my own. So I've been seeing around on the internet these very sort of simple, I think is the word, unstructured but structured not fitted dresses. So obviously got to have a flounce for the tiered effect thing that's very in at the moment. I really like a wrap over. I've already drawn in the tiny shoulders there, and I've done, I think, a 3/4 length sleeve, but I haven't decided yet on that bit. I thought, right, what shall I use for fabric? This is the fabric. This is an old sheet, but it's quite a fancy old sheet. It did have this sort of border down one end of birds and flowers, and then it went into a really, really dark green. Like, there you go, you can see like another bit of it there, like a lace thing. So obviously I have already cut out some bits, and I thought, how could I utilise the beautiful border? And originally I had thought this was a double sheet. It's not, it's a single top sheet. In my head, when it was a double sheet, I thought, oh, that'd be enough to do the bottom flounce. I thought that would work really well on here. Anyway, when I looked at it, I realised it was a single, and I thought, okay, I'll do the bodice out of that. So I worked out what shapes I needed for the bodice. So the back's fairly straightforward. Literally all you need to know is what your back measurement is here, how long you want it, and where your shoulders fall. And it's fairly easy to mock up a pattern piece for this. And then this one, once I'd mocked up the back pattern piece, I started the front one exactly the same. The shoulders actually fit better than my drawing, and then extended it out to make the wrap over part. The waistband didn't really need a measurement. I only needed that because it was a nice border print, and I couldn't cut this square into it because I needed to do some shaping of this part. So the pattern pieces that I made are another old sheet. There's many iterations here of the armhole and the ankle of the shoulder and everything, so I got it right in the end. And then what I did was I actually extended it quite a lot, because I thought, well, if I'm going to alter it, that's where I would alter it, because I know that I don't want to alter around here because I've got a narrow back and no shoulders. So anyway, this is the right one, this is the right size now. And then I made up the right hand side, so just a wrap over piece, and here's the shaping. And the way I worked out the shaping was I made these two pieces by literally drawing around this half piece and then extending it out and changing the neckline part. And then I stitched it together. I machine tacked it, tried it on, and then worked out that I actually needed to take quite a lot off here. That's quite an angle, because that fits around me. And then I did a few adjustments and then finally cut out the bodice. So I have a bodice already made, because this is being all done in a hurry. I'm sorry, it's not any fancy camera angles or following me sewing. It's literally more of a vloggy thing, but it gives you an idea. So this is the bodice. Isn't it cute? So there's the overlap part. That's already been hemmed, and this is where it meets up. And it's very loose fitting, but it has got a shape. And what I had to do for this bit, this is the bit I was talking about. There's quite an angle there, but I wanted a band that went around like a nominal waistband. It's just just above the waist actually, but it gives it a little bit of definition and it'll look very pretty. Now, to get it to match on the back, if I turn this inside out, what I had to do was I had to do a little bit of finagling. I actually cut this border off and stitched it back on, and then cut out the back piece so that I could match it up at the sides. I don't think it was that necessary, but it made me happy because now it matches up at the sides. So that's the side seam. And then I stitched it on the front once I'd done my overlapping bit here. I stitched this panel all together first. So you get a full idea of what the fabric was like. I'll just leave it on the back there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out what to do with the sleeve. So this is what it's going to look like. So we've got the front bodice part. The bodice part is probably the hardest. So I now need to know what to do with the sleeves. Do I want a 3/4 length sleeve? Do I want a ruffle on it? I don't know. So I did think, because this is the bit that I had to unpick off the bottom, you know, it was just turned to make a nice thick, nice wide hem, you know, at the top of a decorative top sheet. That's what that bit is, and I cut it off. I was thinking, did I want to ruffle this, or does it kind of cute ruffled? Or somewhere I think I've got some dark green lace. There's a bit of me that just thinks the challenge of just using stuff from the sheet would be quite interesting. So this has got a salvage on here, this side, so that makes a natural hem there. The job's already been done. See, that was folded all the way over there, so that's why that's been unpicked, but I can stitch that down to make a little edge. Probably what I do is tuck that in and stitch it down like that, and then ruffle this just by gathering it. I'll probably gather it on the machine. I don't think I've got time to sit and hand gather it, so I don't know. Anyway, that's the ruffle. Far too much time spent on the ruffle. So what I'm going to do next is go and just draft out a sleeve shape by using the pattern piece I've already made, this piece here. So you can see it would be the curve here. This is where the roundy bit of the sleeve sits into. This is called the arm side. So it needs to fit in this shape here, and the easiest way of doing that is to literally draw around that. So I'm going to go and do that and try and make a sleeve that fits. What I'll probably do is make the sleeve off of this, but then stitch it, tack it into this. I'll just do one, and it'll just be out of the white sheet fabric. I'll baste it into this and then go and try it on and make sure that it fits okay. And then when it does, just undo it all, cut some out of the fabric and stitch them in. One last thing I need to mention. I've just started turning this, which is absolutely fine on the machine. It's not the tidiest because I wasn't really concentrating. So when I got to the back, I could force it by folding this and folding it again and stitching it down, but I don't like the way it looks because it's got a tendency to twist. So I think what I'm going to do is undo just a little bit of this back to here, and then I'm going to cut a facing for this back part instead, and I think that'll be much neater. It's another step, but honestly it probably takes the same amount of time to go and cut the facing, stitch it on, understitch it, turn it through and then tack it on as it will for me to fight with this, be really disappointed with it, stitch it in place, it'd be all twisted, try and iron it, then unpick it and then do the facing anyway. So, and the way you get the shape of the facing is by taking this part, because it's this piece here. So I'll literally get the fabric, some of this, just a little offcut, and fold it, and then I'll draw out the facing, and I only need about this much. So if I draw this shape, draw along there, take it away, join up the dots, and then I've got a facing that will fit this neckline. So I'm going to go and make a sleeve and make a facing, and I'll come back. So I've made the facing and I've stitched it in. This is it here. There's no raw edges there now, and this, I haven't even ironed this yet, and it's sitting really, really flat. And then on the shoulder seam, see, I've just folded it under here, and it's literally just stitched here. It's not, I haven't even stitched it there, you don't really need to. So it just means there's no raggedy bits there, and then it goes straight into the turn here. And then the treatment on the shoulders is I did a flat felled seam on the machine. So this is the inside, this is the outside. If you do it by hand, you don't get 2 rows of stitching, well, a seam and a row of stitching, but I don't mind that, and honestly, I think I chose really well the colour of thread because you can't see it. The only thing I'm thinking about is what to do with this waist thing at the moment. I'm almost wishing I hadn't cut off the other part, because I could have turned that back on itself and made a casing to run a drawstring or something through it to give it a bit more shape. But here's the thing, doing something like that, although it's easier to do it at this stage, it's not undoable when the whole dress is finished, because all I'd have to do is stitch a casing on. So that's literally like a piece of fabric with no raw edges, so you iron under the edges or use a piece of bias binding, has to be wide, or even ribbon, and stitch it all the way along the inside and then leave a gap and then do a little hole on the front, 2 little holes, and then thread something through. And you can still do that. You can totally do that after the garment's made. It's just easier if you do it now. And then I've also, the last thing I've done is I have made a pattern piece for a sleeve. So all I did was I pulled it out gently, because it's still the same shape. So like that, and that's what this shape is here. Once I've got the sleeves on, I can assess if I think they need tweaking a bit. And I thought I could do, as if they were really, you know, a bit weird shaping, I could put darts in to adjust that. And you can just do that on the inside of them. And I'll also adjust the length there at the end. I'll cut these out as best I can from an area of the fabric. I'll have to have a think in the morning as well about what I've got left, sort of yardage wise. I will see what I've got left, measure it, unpick this so that I can see how much space it takes out. Remind myself I need 2 of them, not 1. That will probably dictate how I cut out the flounces. It's very much going to be dictated by how much fabric I've got. Those are my plans for tomorrow. So I'm going to turn all this off now and go and sit down in a dark room. Right, it is the next day. So I actually measured all of the existing things that I have. So I measured the front waist and the back waist, and they are different because of the style of the garment, because I want it to be quite loose but quite loosely fitted, whatever. So obviously there's quite a lot of shaping on the front and there's no shaping on the back. So front waist was 27 inches, the back waist was 29.5 inches, which gives me a total of 56.5. And of course that's all stitched in, so that doesn't need any seam allowance for that at the sides, unless I'm joining panels of fabric together, in which case yeah, it does. The skirt length, I was trying to do it on myself from where I think the waistband falls to where I think I want the skirt to finish. So I've got between 30 and 32. Remember, I'm 5'7" and a bit, and I have a very high waist, so a 32-inch skirt from Empire Line is going to finish about 6 inches below my knee, I think is about right. So if you're taller or shorter, adjust accordingly on that. So then I wanted to measure what the first tier should be, and I tried to do that by dangling a tape measure and trying not to bend over while I read the measurement, and I think it's about 19 inches, which is quite a way above my knee, but that's okay. So that's the first tier, and then the second tier I thought would be about 13 inches. So it's not quite as drastic as this. It's very similar. So remember, this is Empire Line, so this would be my knee would be about here. So actually probably that's quite good. Then I measured the sleeve, which I've got the pattern piece for, because this is trying to calculate fabric. This is why I've done all these measurements. So the sleeve length at the moment is 15 inches. That gives me some leeway to adjust it. The sleeve width is from the largest part to the largest part. So that's the underarm part here going right the way across there. That's 25.5 inches, which has got plenty of ease. So it's not going to be a tight sleeve. It's just going to look nice. So then I measured my leftover fabric of all the bits that I've cut out of one end. So the length is 91 inches and the width is 71 inches. So we've got quite a lot of fabric to play with. So what I need to know is how many strips and things I can get out of it. So what I thought I could do was the top tier, I thought could be the entire width of the fabric, so 71 inches. And then I thought, well, it'll be a little bit skimpy on gathers. I don't want it poofy. I thought the best way to do this, so we've got 91 inches of fabric, okay? Oh, first of all we need to add in seam allowance. So from 19, if we take away 20 inches, that gives us 71. So that would be the first tier. Then if we take away the 15 inches, because that's for the sleeves, got to have sleeves, that gives us 56 and a weird bit. And then with the 56, if we divided that by the 14, so how many times we can cut strips off of this. So we've got 56 inches left across here, and how many 14-inch strips we can get out of that. Let's divide by 14. It's exactly 4. That's quite a lot. 4 times nearly more than this. That's going to be really, really, really big, fat, poofy, ruffly thing. I think that's a bit extreme, even for me. So I think 3 would be nice, 2 was what I was going for. Hadn't anticipated quite how much fabric there was. So bear with me. This is what I thought I would do instead. So hang on to your hats, more measuring. So 91 inches again. So if we take away 20 inches, that gives us the first tier. So yeah, we can fit off the first tier. So the first 20 inches is gone. That's the first tier. Then the sleeve length is 15 inches, which will come, you can fit out of 20 inches. So if we take off 20 inches and cut the sleeves out of that, and then save the rest of that bit to add on to make this tier a bit more, so minus another 20 inches gives us 51, and that will have some sleeves. And then we're left with 51 inches divided by 14, which gives us 3.5. It's very, very generous. So we don't lose much on that. We get a bit more generosity on here and there's slightly less cutting. So that was me trying to do maths, and I think I did well. So now I need to write down a little note to myself exactly how many strips and how wide they are. So I'm going to do that. So I've done all the cutting. This is for the bottom tier. This is all the fabric we have left, just that. So I think there's a bit about 6 inches wide. And then here's the 2 bigger pieces. So I'm going to take one of these now and cut the sleeves out. Where we know we want 20 inches left at the end, we could cut that off first, or just hope for the best and hope that my measuring's good. We're going to go for the hope for the best method, of course. Obviously I want it double because it's a sleeve, so I need 2. First thing is, so you get fabric left over if you want some, is put what's supposed to be straight near the straight edge. And let's move it all the way over. So obviously fabric on fabric sticks a bit, but that's no bad thing. It's just to make sure it's all smoothed out. So this is in the right place now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this piece and I'm going to fold the fabric here so that I know I can cut out another sleeve. See, that was easy to fold that in half because it's pinned on, so it's in the right place now. Okay, so they're pinned in place. And now we're literally just going to cut. So this has already got seam allowance included. And then on this side, normally I would cut this off, but just in case we need some more fabric, I'm actually going to cut the shape. So there we go. We have 2 sleeves cut out, which I'll take off in a minute. And then we have our leftover bit of fabric. We are going to measure the narrowest part. Oh, well, that's a good sign. Okay, it's not quite 20. I don't think I'd included the weird stitching at the side, so I'm just going to straighten this up for a start because this pattern's gone off a bit. But this is the piece that I will be putting into the top tier, so there'll be an extra bit of fabric put in there. So I'll cut this all out now. So this is going to go and be put on with the big piece, so I'll put that on one side. So I just wanted to show you one of the sleevers on the progress so far. So this is a side seam. So I've set one of the sleeves in and you can see it's very, very, very slightly gathered. I've pinned it in ready to sew and I'll try and smooth some of it out. And then I finished off the inside of the sleeve. That's what it looks like on the outside and that's what it looks like on the inside. So there's no raw edges at all. So my next thing is to go and wrestle with the sewing machine. So I just wanted to go into detail about how to set in a sleeve a bit more. Some people struggle to do this, and it's, even though I've been dressmaking for, I don't know, gazillions of years, it's not my favourite job, but it is necessary. The first thing to do is to stitch 2 lines on a pattern it will show between 2 points. There'll be a dot here and a dot on the other side, and those are the 2 points that you're going to ease the sleeve in. And ease is literally that. It's not a gather, it's to just ease the fullness around the curve, because we're trying to set a convex curve into a concave curve, which is always a little bit difficult. So on this one, I've done the stitching and I've done the gathering easing stitches, and I've started pulling them a bit, so there's a little bit sort of wobbly there, because I don't want to do too much, because I can do a little bit in the garment itself. And then I'm just trying to make sure that I can hold the bit of fabric in between the stitch line flat, and then that gives me an idea of where it's going to sit on the shoulder, and then it's not going to show as a gather. It's literally going to be stitched to that flat bit. I'm just easing it round now. You'll see I've got a red pin in And I always use red pins as markers so that I know that that is the top of the shoulder seam. It just so happens on this dress, because I designed it and patterned it myself, the shoulder seam is actually on the top of the shoulder, and that's how the sleeve is actually even front and back. It's not shaped in any way different. So I just needed to mark that part. So when you've done that, turn your bodice inside out, or your shirt, or whatever it is you're using, and find your sleeve hole. So there it is. And the first thing you do, this stays right sides out. So the body goes inside out and the sleeve stays right sides out. That way means that you will actually be doing right side to right side and stitching wrong side and wrong side. That's probably the easiest thing to get wrong, is you do all this, it all looks beautiful, you go and machine it on and you realise you've stitched the sleeve inside out. If you do it this way, if you always turn the body inside out and leave the sleeve the right way out, that won't happen. So then you match up the underarm with the underarm, and just match up those two seams, so where the stitch line is there, and then you pop a pin in that, and then you take the red pin and the seam here and you match those up. So you take, there's the shoulder seam there and there's the red pin, and you match those up like so. And when you're sure that they're in the right place, you can take that pin out and use it to pin the shoulder seam in place. So now we've got a sleeve that fits at the top and fits at the bottom, but we need to share out the rest of the stuff, the rest of the fabric. The way I do it is I pin all of the below the gathering or the easing threads, and then I share out the rest of it between them. It's not far off actually, it should be okay. So you literally just put the two right sides together and keep pinning them. And then when you get to the gathering thread, I'll pin to this side, and then I'll do the same around there in a minute. But because we've already pinned the shoulder part together, all of this fabric's got to fit between these two pins. And what we're aiming for is this flat part between the two stitching lines to be able to be pinned flat against this one. Now the easiest thing in the world is you end up sort of slipping, and so this keeps slipping forward. So just keep bringing that edge, which is going to be wobbly, don't worry about that, it's the bit down there that we're worried about, but bring it down until they're level, just like any other seam, and pin it in place. Just do another little check. I think that's going to be okay. I'm just going to ease out all of that and put a pin here because I think this is pretty much right. If it isn't, you can divide your sections up so you can match them along. That's one side done, so I shall do the other side in a minute, and then I will tack it in place like this one. And then I'm going to take it over to the machine, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to machine it this way round so I can see where this is. So if I see any little bits that are starting to develop like a crease or a little, you know, a little gathered part, I can ease that out at the machine, whereas if it's underneath I can't see until the end. So I have stitched in both the armholes, and I'm now going to cover the inside stitching. So here it is all stitched down and all the tacking and everything. I've already trimmed off like half of the seam allowance. There's about half of this, and then I found a little offcut of bias binding, which I haven't got a huge amount of, but it's enough to do 2 armholes. And rather than open it out, stitch it on, turn it over and stitch it back, I'm going to try and catch it all in one. So this is going to be hilarious. So let's have a go. Let's do it live on camera. So I'm going to start just past the side seam, because when I come back round I'm going to need to overlap the bias binding, and where the side seam is, that's already quite a lot of bulkiness. So if I start here, give myself a fighting chance. Right, and you can see that that's all caught on the other side. It's all nice and neat on the inside. Not my best machine sewing, but the object of the exercise is to have as few loose bits as possible. And if you're someone with sensitive skin and that, you'll understand. Right, here we are. Both of them have been stitched on and they've been edged on the inside, so you can see how much neater that looks. And when you've finished, when you've come to the other end, I've just literally overlapped it a bit. Just have a quick check on the other side to make sure you've caught everything down, because sometimes it does slip off. And on the other one, oh, there it is. There was one tiny bit that hadn't been caught down. I'd stitched away from it on this side here, so that was loose, so I just had to go in and stitch it again. So you might have noticed I haven't done any cuff treatment yet. It's because I don't know if I want the sleeves that long or anything until the dress is all done. Sometimes proportion and stuff becomes a lot clearer when it's done. So there's the bodice part. See, looking pretty good. I just need to give this a press, and I thought you'd probably enjoy watching me wrestle with my tailor's ham. I do have a sleeve one somewhere, but I think for a shoulder I think this is okay. The best way of pressing this is towards the shoulder seam, I think. So you can feel it on there and then get the iron. I have got a couple of little pleats in there, only because I'm rushing and they're not that bad. And just give it a good iron down. We can get most of them out. Now when it's washed for the first time, it'll probably be quite a lot better. So this is the one I've ironed. There's the seam there. So you can see there it's eased in. And I could probably do a bit of a better iron, not on the camera, but it doesn't look gathered at all. And this is the one that hasn't been ironed yet. So you can still see it's like a little bit poofy in places. So this will end up looking like the other side. And I have to say, I am so chuffed already that I've made this bodice part and used all of the border thing. I know this is going to be a really, really cute dress. I'm probably going to wear it till it falls apart, which is one of the reasons why you're going to go to all the difficulty of doing some pretty intense maths there for a moment. It's worth finishing things off properly, even if it is for you. You're so worth having a garment that's beautifully made that, you know, people look at that and go, oh my god, did you make that yourself? You know, it's so neat. But this is the secret of neat dressmaking, is to finish all of the bits properly and then making sure you press at every stage. So the woman that hasn't, because she was rushing. So we are so nearly there. I consider having the bodice nearly finished being nearly there. Right, I'm going to go and iron this, put it on one side, and then I'm going to join all the skirt pieces and start doing that. So time for another quick update. I'm just doing the first tier, which is the wider one of the two. I've stitched them all together and done some flat felled seams on the inside. They're nice and neat, so that's good. And then I divided it into 4 and put red pins on each of the quarters. So I divided the, what would you call this, ruffle, first tier of the skirt, divided it into 4, put a red pin on each sort of section, and then did the same with the bodice and put a blue pin on there. I ran out of red pins. They're still on the piece of work that I'm supposed to be finishing with trees on it. And then I started hand gathering. So I've done this section here and I hand gathered it and tied a knot at one end, and then when I got to the other end I just put a pin somewhere roughly in the middle and just eased the gathers in. It's not very tight gathers. It's actually harder to get these even than it is if it was more gathered. Weirdly, that's just the way it is. If I'd done smaller stitches it might have been a little bit easier, but it really doesn't matter. And the stitch length I went for was like these little squares, so they're small enough, it's fine. And then I have tacked that in, so this is now fixed down, so it means they're not going to move around too much when I stitch them on. And I started with the back section first, so this is the side seam here, and then I'm going around the back. So I've just hand gathered this one, so I've pinned at this end for that section. Then what I've got to do is I've got to ease this gathering along a bit until this bit fits on here. I'm not going to worry about it being even gathers until I just know it's the same length. And then that means I can finish off this thread and then I can smooth the gathers out in between and I'm not going to undo them at all. So I'll just do a couple of stitches to hold that in place. I'll use this same needle and thread, so I'll just put this out the way for now. I'll use that to stitch back across the gathers when they're in the right place, so I'll just sit and smooth them. They move around really easily. You get them just so, and then you start stitching them on and they move all over the place. What I will say is where they overlap the sections, I started just inside this one with a knot and made sure there's a good amount of gathering there because I don't want any flat bits. And then I will just keep going. But this is the easiest bit to show you on rather than the 3 times around, you know, the 3 widths of fabric, which is lots of fabric. This is just 1 and a bit. I could show you what it looks like on the thing, so you can see it's just very, very lightly gathered. And I did try on the bodice with the sleeves and everything one very last time before I started putting the skirt on, to make sure, because that would be the time to do any alterations, like if I needed to add any more to the waist or cut some off. And actually I thought it needed to be shorter than this, but it doesn't, it's fine. So that's how far I've got. So this is the final tier. It's been stitched on. This is the inside. So I actually hand gathered it and then tacked it on so it didn't move around, and then it's just been machine stitched, and then it's just been overcast, which is why it's pulled it over slightly. What I'm going to do probably when I get back off holiday is put bias binding on all of this, but I don't think I've got time to do that because I still have to hem this. And I'm just going to, because it was cut square, so just straight across the fabric, there's no shaping in it, I'm just going to run it through the machine, choose an amount like that and stitch it down, and then I'm going to stitch it down again like that. And I might even use the blind hem stitch on my machine, or I might not, depends if I can be bothered to set it all up. I'll just run a line of machine stitching down there, and I think that'll look okay. It's longer than I thought it was going to be, so I can do that with the hem. I can just take whatever I want off of it and it'll still be fine. If it had been too short, what I was going to do is run a line of bias binding along here and then just turn that over and stitch that down. But I don't need to do that, so that's good. And I'll show you what it looks like on the outside. So this is it. This is the bottom tier, and this is the bit into the waistband. And it looks so cute on. It's really swishy. It's like proper swishy summer dress. So my son said it looked very cottagecore. Apparently that's a thing. So yeah, I'm just going to go and do the hem. And then the only other thing that needs to be finished is the sleeves. What I'm going to do is use this bit of green that was around this bit here. It was just the other half of that, and it's already got a hem turned on it, which is rather handy. So what I'm going to do is cut a bit off of this and a bit off of the sleeve as well, and use it like a bias binding. If I could think how to do it, it's the end of a very long day. If I could think how to do it, I would do it so no stitching showed, but I don't have any more brain cells. I think it would actually take me about half an hour to work out how to do that right now. So I'm just going to do it on the machine. I think it probably involves hand sewing, and quite frankly I've had enough of that today. I'll have to find a thread that's a better colour, because I really don't want to put a cream thread on this. I think that would look awful, so I'm going to have to find a darker green. Probably check back in just one more time when I've done those bits. So this is the hem. So I folded it over and stitched it and folded it over again, and I just kept it small so that it is a bit more bulky and supports the bottom of the flounce, frill, tier, whatever you want to call it. And then I thought, oh yeah, I can get this done. I've made a mistake. So I stitched this all the way across. So I need to unpick that, but I'm so tired I'm going to do this. All I'll do is I'll open this bit out and stitch that on there, and I found some thread that wasn't too bad. It's okay. It's not the best colour in the world, but it'll do. So I'm going to stitch that down, and then that's the cuff. That's the dress. It's nearly pretty much done. By the time you see the thumbnail and everything, it will be finished, and I will actually be wearing it on my holiday, so that's kind of cool. And thank you so much for joining me, as always, on my mad dash to make a summer dress for my holiday. And I will see you all again very soon with the second part of that textile landscape with all the beautiful embellishments and stuff. So thanks again. Bye.